whatever you believe about Jesus, when he shows up in his writings and his teaching and his apostles, there's a traumatic transformation in what a leader is, right? And so today you pick any book off the shelf and it says, oh, leadership is servanthood, and leadership is humility, and leadership is all these things that we take for granted. Well, before Jesus, none of that was true. I have high expectations because we do, but I also have hope that you can actually meet those high expectations. I was faithful in making my bed and showing up on time and working hard and getting after it. That quiet professionalism. I'll let my work speak for itself, not my words. I kept my mouth shut, my head down, and show up, shut up, get up, and do up. And they say, we'll follow you. We'll follow you into a burning building.
Hey there, and welcome to From the Ground Up Show, the show where we encourage and inspire the next generation of free-thinking leaders by telling the stories of those that have been there, done that, and are still getting it done, building a life that they love with their hearts, their hands, and their hustle. I am your host, Erick Loden. If you guys enjoy the show, enjoy the content, help me out. Like, share, follow, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, on social media, on YouTube. We are at From the Ground Up Show on almost all major platforms. If you want to leave a review or a comment, that helps us out a lot. If you can click that auto download button on your favorite podcast platform, those early downloads when the shows are released each week really help us out. And the biggest thing you could do, if you want to pause the show right now and send it to a friend, send it to a coworker that might appreciate it or enjoy it, that really means a lot to us, and that's our best way to get the show out there. Also, don't forget, if you want to get some From the Ground Up Show merchandise, our store is open. It is shop.fromthegroundupshow.com. So make sure you check that out. There's hats, sweatshirts, water bottles, coffee cups, anything you might want. Today, I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a fun one. I am joined by Jesse Boulden. He is the director of the International Alert Academy. The International Alert Air Land Emergency Resource Team Academy is a 9-month military-style discipleship and training program for young men between the ages of 18 and 22. They are based in Big Sandy, Texas, and were founded in 1994. Alert has spent over 3 decades forging young men through boot camp style character formation, nationally recognized emergency response certifications, and real world disaster deployments. Alert's nearly 3,000 graduates have responded to hurricanes, wildfires, floods, and search and rescue operations across the United States and internationally. Jesse came to Alert in the fall of 2008 at 18 years old and never left. After earning his EMT certification and completing the program's leadership track, he rose through the ranks from squad leader to drill instructor to sergeant major over the entire student body, eventually serving as the commanding officer of Alert Basic Training before being named the director in 2021. Jesse is also a volunteer firefighter, a deacon at his church, a father, and a husband. So, Jesse, you got a lot going on there. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Eric. I appreciate the opportunity and the introduction. Thank you.
When I was roofing and working in the hot sun every day, I would sweat a lot, and my clothes never really got clean. They were left stiff and uncomfortable with residue from the detergents we tried, and the smell came back almost immediately if you started to sweat again. Most detergents don't actually break down and rinse out sweat. They mask it with strong fragrances. So I'm excited to tell you about my new partner, Athlete Fresh. Athlete Fresh dives deep into fabrics to actually break down sweat and the enzymes that cause that smell. It rinses clean every time. Athlete Fresh will actually rinse out the residue left by other detergents. Bring new life to your work clothes or athletic gear. Check out Athlete Fresh and remember what it feels like to smell fresh. athletefresh.shop/fromthegroundupshow. Again, that is athletefresh.shop/fromthegroundupshow. Yeah, well, I'm excited to learn all about Alert, but we like to start every show learning a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, what it was like growing up, and what brought you to Alert back in 2008?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I grew up in a Christian home. That's probably the most important thing about my upbringing, and probably the most foundational thing about my upbringing is that My parents were first generation believers, and so I had the opportunity to grow up in that home environment with becoming a Christian because of that very early on in my life, which kind of dictates the rest of my life, right? Because that foundation. But my dad was in the military, so he was a submarine commander. He was in the subservice Navy for his whole career, and so I kind of grew up a little bit of everywhere. So born in Virginia, and then Connecticut, California, Hawaii, and then he eventually retired in Maryland. And so by the time I was 18, I'd already moved 18 to 20 times. Right? So the idea of growing up in one house was a completely foreign concept to me. I didn't even know people like that until later in my life because I grew up on military bases, and everybody moves every 3 to 6 years. It was just the way it is. And I joke because my dad was an officer and because he was the commanding officer of a submarine. I got to do sleepovers in nuclear powered submarines, right? And go out to on sea on the sail of a submarine, and I thought that was a normal childhood. I thought everybody got to do that, right? And little did I know that was a big deal back in the day. So that was those are probably the two big formative things in my life. Is the fact that growing in a military family on military bases or around the military my whole life, and then from a Christian worldview, by God's grace, from my parents both being Christians and being heavily involved in whatever local church we plugged into, right? Which was many different churches over my first 18 years because of all that moving. Yeah. And so those were kind of the two big formative things I would say. I was homeschooled. I was we were kind of the early homeschool back in the day, 90s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. So my parents were kind of very pioneerish, I guess, from a standpoint of they were first generation Christians, both of them, and then they were kind of figuring out the homeschool thing on their own. And so I like to say my parents set out to do something that had never been done in either of their families or since has been done in either of their families. And so I give a lot of credence and credit to my family of origin, my parents. That's a heck of a lot of courage they both had to kind of figure that out in the midst of a military career and moving all over the country and all the rest.
That is an interesting upbringing. I imagine being the commander of a submarine, your dad was probably gone for large periods of a time. How did that affect your family and your home life?
Fortunately, by the time we came, kids came along, and I'm actually one of 6 kids, right? So that's kind of another little tidbit there. 5 boys, 1 girl, so a mostly male dominated house as far as just numbers go. But by the time I really have good memories, he wasn't gone for probably more than 6 to 9 weeks. The real long deployments happened early on in his career. By the time I have solid memories now, he was gone, right? He was gone a lot. Just as far as training goes and sea tours and sea trials. And so there was a repetition of him here and then gone and then here and then gone. Not for months at a time, but for sure, chunks of time, maybe a month here and a month there. And that even continued after he got out of the Navy. He ended up working for the Department of Energy in Washington, D.C. As a government employee. And that too had lots of travel to it. And so probably the big thing that transpired is my mom ended up filling a lot of both roles a lot of the time, kind of the mom and dad role because she had to. And so that obviously, created tension at times, or dad would come home and try to step into that father role. And we were kind of like, well, you haven't been here, Dad. You don't know what's going on. So it certainly had an impact. There are things that I look back and I say, there's something to be said about growing up in one town with one church, with one job. There's some value to that. And my family did miss out on that, right? We didn't have that core community or that core church or that one job. I didn't really get to go to work with Dad like some of these guys that I've met over the years, right? Like, oh, my dad took me to the shop, or he took me to I didn't really do that. I didn't know what was going on, and nor was I going to go to the Office of Naval Intelligence with my dad, right? There's no way, right? It's a top secret, building. I'm not going to the Pentagon with my dad. So there's some of those experiences that, because of his military service, that and if any other military brats are listening to this, they'll understand, right? You appreciate what your dad does, you like what he does, you think it's super cool, but you don't really get to participate in it in the same way that you might if your dad ran his own company or his own business or just had more of a blue collar job.
That's interesting. And so, one of 6 siblings, where do you fall in the birth order?
Yeah, so I'm number 3, so dead smack in the middle. So there's an older brother, an older sister, me, and the rest is boys all the way down.
Okay.
Which I actually enjoyed because I could hang with the older ones if I wanted to, stay up late, watch movies if I wanted to do that. or I could go play Fort in the Woods with the younger ones, right? If I wanted to be the captain of the little guys. So I liked being dead smack in the middle personally.
That's awesome. You don't hear that very often, but I can see that even with my own kids. The middle one can connect both directions and enjoys doing so.
Well, even to this day, I'm kind of that tethering between the olders and the youngers because I kind of understand both worlds. So they'll all kind of come to me and say, "Hey, talk to the olders about this, or talk to the youngers about that," because I get to have decent relationships with all of them. Part of that, I think, is because I was dead smack in the middle.
So you came to Alert at 18 years old in 2008. What was it that brought you to Alert? What made you decide to go that route rather than diving into the workforce or going into a college education or some of the other options available to you?
Yeah. So I went to a camp in Durango, Colorado, right? This is kind of a formative memory for me. And the founder of Alert, whose name is Ron Furman, he had actually left Alert by that point, retired from Alert, and he was running these summer camps around the country. And I didn't know that at the time. And so my parents had just found this summer camp in Durango, Colorado. And so I attended the summer camp. It was a week long, right? It's not all summer, but it was a week long in Durango, Colorado. And Ron Furman was there, the founder of Alert, and he was staffing these camps with prior Alert guys, right? So guys who'd been Alert alumni, they'd gotten out of Alert, right? They finished their training, and then he was using them as the staff to help run these camps around the country. And so as a 14-year-old, I show up to this camp, and I think these guys are, cooler than sliced bread. Now, in my brain, they're 30, 40 years, these guys were 18 years old, right? 19, 20 years old. But they had all these kind of these war stories, and they had all these skills and these adventures. They'd been all over the world, all over the country. They'd done all these cool things, and I just really I admired them, and both for the coolness factor they brought. Right, where I like to say I didn't know men like that existed. Right, I just hadn't run across guys like that, and I was like, these guys are awesome. How did they get to be this awesome? Right, well, they're all these Alert guys, right? They're wearing these shirts that say Alert on the back, and they were also not just cool, they were also touchable, or they were very relatable, very relational. And so as this 14-year-old kid, I kind of thought, well, if they're just like me in a lot of ways, right? They're human, they're touchable. Maybe one day I can be just like them. And I've actually interacted with these guys, 20 years later at like reunions, and they've come back and I've walked up to them and said, you don't remember this, but you were staff at this little camp in Durango, Colorado for 14-year-old me. And that week fundamentally changed my life, getting to hang out with those guys. So at that moment, it really settled in my mind that I'm going to go to Alert. I'm going to be an Alert guy. I want to do this thing. Obviously, the environment also attracted me. Right, growing up in military bases, my dad was in the military. I was always kind of a big fan, kind of attracted to that world of structure and discipline and uniforms and things. So that was always, obviously helpful. And coming out of high school, right, a lot of guys don't know what they want to do. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do maybe long term, but for sure I knew the next step was this program, right? It was this 9-month, year-long program. I wanted to at least get through that, graduate that, do all those things. And that was going to hopefully help me figure out what the next step was going to be.
It sounds like the next step for you just stuck around. Did you do anything between graduating from Alert and coming on staff, or did you just roll straight into that next role?
Yeah, so I graduated. So the program's 9 months or a year. It was a year long at the time. So came to basic in 2008, did the EMT program, leadership pipeline, and then, by the providence of God and then invitation, which not everybody gets and opportunities aren't always there, doors were opened. And they actually asked me to come back and hey, would you fill this role? And would you fill that role? And because I'd finished the training and I still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, right? I had some skills and some experiences and thought maybe I'll join the military and maybe I'll go into, fire EMS. But these doors opened and I said, well, you know what? I'll give it another 3 months, right? And do it 3 months. Okay. And that inevitably just led to another opportunity and another opportunity and another opportunity. And it just made sense. Right? Because there were actually other things that came up during that time, other opportunities, even from other organizations or other programs or other things. And it just fit me like a hand to a glove. And I remember one of my bosses saying that as he came to me and was mentoring me during a period. And I was kind of struggling, do I stay? Do I go? And he looked at me and he was like, this place just kind of fits you like a glove, Jesse. I don't know why you would try to go and figure something else somewhere else when this just makes sense. That's probably the best way to describe it. Is
Huh?
I had a tremendous amount of opportunity that other guys never got or didn't get. The timing worked out, the opportunity was there, and then there was the ask, right, where the organization asked me, and obviously I prayed about it and I sought counsel on it, but it just made sense, and I do attest to that, to God's direction, right? God closing doors, opening doors in order to keep me here for the almost the last 18 years at this point.
So it sounds like that's maybe an unusual track. What is a normal career track for the typical alert graduate? Do they go into the trades? Do they go to college after graduating? Do they go to work as a first responder somewhere? What's kind of the typical track for somebody that comes through alert?
Yeah, and I do need to specify that that is not a normal track for almost any of the alumni association. The goal is not to train you and keep you, right? The goal is to train you and send you. The mission statement of Alert is forging extraordinary men who will influence their world for Christ, right? So they come, we train, then we send them back, right, into whatever their world is, right? The workforce, college, military, the church, their family, whatever. So about a third of our guys will actually end up in the military. Either they come here and they realize they like the environment, right? And they say, ooh, man, I really like this. I want more of this. And they kind of go home and they miss it. Or they come to us intentionally in preparation for the military, right? They kind of see it as a military prep program to say, man, this is what they know some alumni who've done very well in the military, and the alumni will attest to their training here, help them do well in the military. And so they'll come here to kind of put some reps in and do some things, get some training. And so a third end up in the military. A third will end up in emergency services, right? Because we do kind of have that angle to us. So they become firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, law enforcement. And then the other third will end up pretty much anywhere, right? They become pastors and lawyers and engineers and go to college and blue collar worker, or construction, or whatever. So that's kind of the breakdown of the student body.
Okay. So it's not necessarily a funnel to a specific career track, but it's a preparation for whatever is next.
Well, and that's really the heart behind it. When the program was started by this guy named Ron Furman, he saw young guys coming out of high school, and he saw an opportunity because these guys were coming out and they were kind of lost, right? They didn't know what they wanted to do, didn't know where they were going to go. There were all these options. A lot of them were going to college and either washing out or never using the degree. And he was saying, "Man, how do we help these guys?" And a third of the guys end up in college probably don't belong there just because they're not geared that way. They don't learn that way.
Yeah.
Another third never use that degree to begin with, right? They get it and never use it. So there's only really a third that probably belong there that need it, right? Your engineers, your doctors, all those guys. And so we saw that gap in the life of a young guy coming out of high school, and he said, "Well, how do we help these guys land on their feet?" Right? They're kind of floundering, and he saw some of the benefits the military had to offer for guys, right? Discipline, structure, camaraderie, brotherhood, skills based. And so we actually put together a cadre of retired or ex-military guys to start the program back in '94. That's kind of where the military style flair comes from. And it's helpful in the life of a young man, right? We tend to be undisciplined, and some of us are lazy, and we're kind of figuring out what we want to do. And this is kind of brings things into focus. And it's designed to help men figure out, okay, how has God gifted me? What has he made me for? How do I use these skills in the service of other people? And so, so our guys end up doing, you name it, we through 3,000 alumni, one of them is out there doing it. And they can all look back to their time at Alert and say, that was a beneficial season of my life to prepare me for what I'm doing today.
I want to take a moment to tell you about this episode's sponsor, MacArthur Company. As a former contractor, I know the importance of working with a great team. That team includes more than your employees. You need what you need on time and at the right location. Competitive pricing sure helps too. A good relationship with your supplier can make a huge difference. That is why I always use MacArthur Company. At MacArthur, you are more than just a number. You are a person, a customer, and a friend. With branches throughout the United States, MacArthur is big enough to handle your most demanding needs, but they do it with small-town service. MacArthur isn't another big box store run by a board answering to stockholders. They are employee-owned, making them one of the last independent suppliers, serving all of your commercial, industrial, and residential building envelope needs. Whether you're doing roofing, insulation, HVAC, or siding, MacArthur has you covered with great service and a personal touch. If great service and good pricing don't win you over, make sure you check out their customer incentive program, where every purchase earns points towards a free vacation. I am already packing for my next MacArthur incentive trip. Call or check online to find your nearest MacArthur warehouse so you too can enjoy superior service and start earning points towards your next vacation. Get what you need, when and where you need it. All the service without the hassle. MacArthurCode.com. Well, I can tell, clearly just the time that you've put in and just speaking to you, you seem to have a real passion for this program and the service it provides to these young men. What was it, outside of the inspiration of wanting to attend Alert as a 14-year-old and seeing the graduates and the way they presented themselves, what is it that really gave you a passion to devote your life to serving in this capacity and working there?
Yeah, well, the reasons I came to Alert were not the reasons I stayed at Alert. So I really came for the adventure of it, right? Whether it's the firefighting or the EMT or the disaster relief, going off and doing cool things, and also the hardship of it, right? It intrigued me. How hard can I push myself? We all watch those Navy SEAL Buds videos, and we all think, I wonder if I could do that, right? I wonder if I could get through Hell Week. And so that was part of the attraction for me to come to Alert was, man, can I do this? Can I be pushed this hard? Can I hike for 24 hours through the night, right? 56-mile endurance hike. Can I do that after hearing these stories from the alum? So I really came for the adventure and the excitement. All of that I got, but I really stayed for the discipleship. So as these older officers or these older guys, mentored me and poured into me and helped me figure out what it was to be a man and to be a Christian man and to, be a healthy husband and a healthy father. And they really had that on display, right? Because you're kind of living life together with these training officers. And I saw them and I said, I want, again, kind of like I did in 2004, I said, I want more of that. How can I spend more time with these guys just, in their hemisphere so that I kind of learn by osmosis, right? I kind of learn by just watching and listening. And so as I was being mentored, I fell in love with that aspect of it and then said, I want to do more of that, right? I want to actually return the favor. As I've been mentored and discipled, I want to kind of turn around and do the same thing for the student body coming in, right? For the young guys, knowing how hard it is to be a young guy, 18, 19, 20, and all the struggles that come with that, all the opportunity that comes with that, and being able to help young guys just like me, come in behind me and help them land on their feet and figure life out and get some direction and get some mentorship and get some discipleship and get pointed in the right direction is really what I fell in love with.
So you mentioned that Ron started the program by kind of seeing a gap where we had young people graduating high school. They didn't know what to do. They really didn't know how to behave as adult men in our culture and just needed some guidance, some encouragement rather than being funneled into a college education that maybe wasn't for them or wasn't required for what their career track would be. Has that mission or that need changed at all? Do you see a different need or a different gap that Alert is filling here 30 some years later?
Yeah, there's a couple of basic questions you always have to ask, whether it's in business or working for an NGO here, and what's the problem you're trying to fix? Right? Is the problem getting better or getting worse? Right? Is the market growing for this problem or is it shrinking? Do you have a solution to the problem? And does that solution work? Right? Does it actually fix the problem? And as I look at Alert, back in '94, and I look at Alert today, I think the answer is yes to all of those things. Right? So what's the problem we're trying to solve? Young men kind of being lost, right? Or young men being awash, right? Young men kind of being on the fringes of society, not sure what they're supposed to do, not a lot of options for them. It's true back in '94. I think it's actually truer today in a lot of ways. So the second question is the problem getting better or getting worse? Well, I think it's getting worse, right? You can kind of look at our culture, and it doesn't take a brain surgeon to realize young men are in trouble, right? They're struggling, and over the last 20, 30 years, because they've been marginalized or cast to the outer reaches or maybe even demonized for their masculinity, that's created a vacuum in young guys' lives. And unfortunately, there's a lot of toxic voices that are filling that vacuum, right? Either from a side of young men should be passive to a side of young men should be overly aggressive, right? You've got some really toxic voices out there, unfortunately, filling that vacuum for young men. because they don't want to latch on to anything. Somebody affirming me, somebody telling me I'm not as broken as the culture says I am for being a man. I think the problem is just getting worse. So does the Lord have a solution to that problem? I would say yes. Right, as because I've been here almost 18 years, I've gotten to work with almost 1,000 guys. I did the math once, and I think it's actually over 1,000 guys in my time here. And I see it work, right? I see it at work, and I see it work almost every single day. Do we have a solution? Yeah, we have a solution to that problem. When we try to fill that vacuum with the right things, with the good things that because it is good to be a man, right? And there are good things about your masculinity, and how do we encourage that and exhort that and lean into that? And then how do we give you skills, right? It's kind of a three-pronged approach, right? Discipleship, training, and service. So how do we disciple these guys from a Christian worldview, make sure they're solid in their faith? How do we give them tangible skills in their toolbox so that they're fit for service, right? Whether it's emergency services skills or just normal life skills. And then how do we equip them for lives of service, right? That when the Son of Man comes, when Jesus shows up, he comes to serve, not to be served. And so how do we help young men take their focus off themselves, which is very natural, pick their head up and go out and whatever they end up doing with their lives, be selfless, sacrificial service. And so do we have a solution? Yeah. Does it work? Yeah. I as an alumni of the program, I can tell you it works. And then having worked with as many guys as I have, I can tell you the solution that we came up with in '94 is still the solution today, and it still works.
Well, I know you've mentioned a few aspects of the program. So are there some prerequisites to join the program? Do you have to be a Christian before you're coming into the program? Do you have to have done well in high school? Who's kind of the prime candidate to come join Alert?
Yeah. Probably the two big misconceptions about Alert is that either we're a bad boys school, right? So we're some kind of a reform school for guys, for criminals or something, right? Which is just not the case, right? We're not a bad boys, military school. And that's the first misconception. The other is that somehow we're a good boys school, for lack of a better term. Where sometimes you got to come with your nose clean, and you got to be straight A's, and you got to have graduated high school, and you got to be a Christian. And neither of those two, paradigms is true. And we're really just looking for guys that want to be better. Right? You don't have to be a Christian. We obviously are unashamedly a Christian organization, but you certainly don't have to be. We're not attached to any denomination, right? So we're non-denominational. We have a pretty middle of the road statement of faith, and the only real prerequisite is that you got to get cleared by a doctor because the training is intense, and then you got to be able to do a certain number of physical fitness assessment tests we have, and as long as you can hit those base numbers, which are pretty low, right? We just want to make sure you're in some physical condition before you show up, and then you got to fill the application out. And the application is not a test. It's just hey, who are you? Where are you from? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And then if you have any inkling that you want to be here, man, if you'll work with us, we'll work with you. And I have seen all shapes and sizes come through the academy. And guys that you think would not make it have made it because they wanted to be here, right? They say, I don't care how hard it is. I want to be here. I want to do well, and I want to get better. So as long as you have an inkling of, I know I should be better than I am right now, I just don't know how to get there. We'll work with you all day long.
Okay. And is there an age cap? I mean, for a guy that's in his 20s, 30s that wants a change of pace, change his life, and wants to be better, can they come and join as well? Or is it primarily kind of that college age group?
Yeah, so the bottom of the age graph there would be 17. That's the lowest we'll go as a 17-year-old. You don't have to officially even be done with high school. Some guys will use this as kind of their last senior year of high school, and that's totally fine. We can work with you on that. So 17's that, and then the oldest I've seen come through, as long as you're not married, right? That's the one prerequisite there, is that it doesn't really make sense to come here and be in this environment while you got a wife and kids at home. You get other responsibilities. Let's go figure that out. You need to make money, not spend money. And so the oldest I've seen come through is 36 years old. So 36-year-old said, I want that change of pace. I want that wake-up call. I want that gut check. I want that brotherhood. And so, 36 is the oldest I've seen come through.
Awesome. So do you feel like at Alert you compete, so to speak, with, colleges or trade schools or that kind of thing? For the candidates or the students that are coming in, or is this kind of a complementary program, or how would you view your relationship with other options available to like a high school graduate looking for the next step.
Yeah, and I would tell you that the competition is probably fiercer today than it was 30 years ago. When my dad was growing up, he used to say, you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, or you could join the military, right? And that was about it. And with every passing year, I think there's even more and more opportunities, which is why I think young men can feel lost, right? They don't know what to do. They're kind of paralyzed because there's just a million and one things you could do. And then you go on social media and you find all of them, right? And everyone's doing them. And so you feel like you're behind or you feel like you don't know what to do and everyone's asking you, what are you going to do? So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest competition would be kind of that narrative of you got to go to college, you got to go to college. And I think young men feel that. Now, just in the last 6 months, we've been able to partner with Anchor University, who is now offering us college credits for our training.
Okay.
And those credits can be taken to other universities, right? Liberty University and Moody and SMU and a handful of others. So that is helpful, right? So we don't just get certifications. Now we can get college credit for your time here. So that is going to help some of that competition. But yeah, that's probably our big, especially with college being online now. I mean, COVID just kind of totally changed the whole world. And we can't do alert online, right? Doesn't work, right? You got to be in person. It does not happen. So that's where it is limiting, as where all these schools can do their courses online, we can't, right? So yeah, what I'll tell people is, if you want to just be a firefighter, well, you can go to your community college and be a firefighter, right? You just want to be an EMT, well, that's fine. You can go to and that's fine. You can go to your community college and be an EMT. But if you want to be transformed, right? You want to become a better man. You want to get grown spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, and walk out more mature and ready for life. Then Alert really is going to fit that ticket for you. Because for me, Alert offered me a lot of the tangible things that I got, right? Certifications, but the untangibles, right? The things you can't put a price on is really what I think is most valuable about the experience here. And that's crazy awesome experiences, right? I got to do things, still get to do things, right? And go places, right? All over the country, all over the world, disaster relief or search and rescue, or push myself on 24-hour endurance hikes, things that you would just not do pretty much anywhere else in most guys' lives. Or as an 18-year-old, right? And as a 19-year-old, I'm put in leadership positions, right? And that helps mature me and grow me up. And I'm in charge of 30 guys, and I'm in charge of 100 guys. At 21, right? I'm in charge of the battalion, right? That's a tremendous opportunity. And so, those crazy experiences, right? You can't put a price on. Second thing is friendships, right? Brotherhood, where I made my best friends while I was here, right? Because those crazy experiences, the blood, the sweat, the tears, we all had together. You get forged together in a special way where, almost 20 years now, my best friends are Alert guys, right? And you get plugged into this worldwide alumni network that you get to be a part of. And our guys are doing everything everywhere, and you can connect with them all over the globe. So that's kind of an intangible thing, right? Where you can't even put a price on those connections, right? There's actually one of the elders in my church went through Unit 1 back in the Northwoods years ago. And yeah, we have a connection because we're Christians, and we have a connection because we're church members. We also have a connection because we're Alert guys, right? We went through 20 years apart, but we're Alert guys, right? We can share that camaraderie. And he's in his 50s, I'm in my 30s, but we have this multi-generational connection now because we have that shared experience. So you get these crazy experiences, you get this brotherhood that you desperately need as a man. And then you get perspective change, right? Where most young men are born kind of looking at themselves, and you walk out of Alert with your head up, this quiet confidence saying, how do I be of service? How do I give my power away, give my strength away, all the things that make being a man good? How do I give all those things away in the service of my family or my church or my community or whatever it is? So those are the things that you really can't put a price tag on.
Yeah.
And so that's in my mind, that's probably the bigger selling point of Alert, right? Yeah, we do the firefighting, yeah, we do the EMT, yeah, we do the hang arrest, we do all that. But technically you can go somewhere else and get those. But I can't promise you that you'll get all those other things in addition to that, except for your time here at the academy.
Well, it sounds like you guys are quite successful at taking young men and transforming them, to use your words, or inspiring them, building them up to be successful in whatever comes next. What are maybe some of the key things that you think are significant in your program that, fathers, churches, maybe even businesses that hire a lot of young people could incorporate into raising their sons, their youth programs, their employees, to kind of tap into this secret sauce that you guys have to help get similar results from the young men that are charged to them?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things that come to mind right off the bat. One is that if you expect poor performance from a certain age demographic, that's probably what you're going to get,
Mm.
right? So if you expect, well, he's this 18-year-old punk, he's kind of lazy, he's kind of sloppy, he's going to show up to work late. Well, if that's your expectations on a young man, that's probably what he's going to do. But if you can challenge him, right, and actually expect more out of him, right, and it's kind of this, this phrase we'll use, we'll say, I have tremendously high expectations for you, and I believe that you can meet them, right? Where you're giving these young guys hope that not just that I have high expectations, because we do, but I also have hope that you can actually meet those high expectations, right? That's how cool is that, right? It's not just that I have them, right? Because that's kind of depressing. Is I have them, and there's no way you're going to meet them. Well, no, I have them, and I believe in you. I believe that you can meet these expectations. I believe you have it in you. I believe you can be better. And here's the thing about young men: they believe that too. Deep down, they know they can be better. They want to be better. They just don't always know how. And so one of the things is those expectations, but then belief in them, that it's not just that I have them. I believe you can actually meet them. I believe you have it in you to meet these high expectations. So that's kind of the first thing, is really the, the necessity of giving these young guys hope, and believing in them. And that's where the mentorship comes in, right? So it's not just I have hope, and I'm also going to give you tools and a pathway to get to where you need to be to meet those expectations. The other thing we watch is, responsibility breeds maturity. I watch it in my own life happen as I got more and more responsibility, as older leaders took a gamble on me, right? They really did take a risk on me, where they said, we're going to give you a shot here. We're going to trust you. At 19 years old, here's 30 guys for you to take care of, and you're going to help them, and you're going to mentor them, and you're going to, right? And you're not this super older than these guys. They're 18 and you're 19, right? So you're really just this side mentor to them, but you're responsible for them, right? And knowing that I'm responsible to my boss, and he's going to show up and expect a certain level of discipline and structure and these things out of the guys he's entrusted me with. That helps breed, which is what I experienced in 2004. These alert guys, I thought they were 30. Well, they were 19. Well, why did I think they were 30? Because they were incredibly mature. Well, why were they incredibly mature? Because these guys had been given responsibility, and that had produced a level of maturity out of them that had just never interacted with, right? I'd met other 18, 19-year-olds before, and they were kind of bums or punks or whatever, right? I thought that was just and unfortunately, the culture has that expectation for young men, right? They say, well, they really don't have to grow up till they're 25. They don't have to grow up till they're 30. We're here to say, no, no, absolutely not. Right? By 18, 19, 20, you can be entrusted with a tremendous amount of responsibility. We think about our grandfathers, and they're, storming the beaches of Normandy at 18, 19, 20 years old. And it's easy to kind of say, well, that was then and this is now. And we're saying, no, I think that's still possible today. If you have high expectations, you have hope that they can meet them, you give them the tools to meet them, and then you give them responsibility, that can absolutely transform a young guy's life and breed about the maturity that we all know they're lacking, right? And instead of beating them up for it and saying, well, you're kind of a bum, and I can't believe, and back in my day, and blah, blah, none of that is helpful. What these guys need is hope, they need tools, and then they need responsibility to help breed that maturity.
Man, yeah, there's some good stuff there that's applicable to a lot of different people and areas. So, well, I know a big part of Alert is, yeah, kind of the first responder field. You guys do EMT certification, search and rescue, disaster relief. I imagine in your 18 years at Alert, you've had some pretty unique experiences. Are there any really exciting or really unique experiences that kind of stick out to you that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah, it's the best experiences are the ones that end positively, right? And so obviously there's a tremendous amount of experiences where we go out on, whether it's a body recovery or a search and recovery or a search and rescue, that ends on a negative note, right? And that's unfortunately that's probably 90% of the time we're going out and it's a recovery and not a rescue. And so unfortunately, by the time they call us, right, it can be more of a recovery than a rescue, and even in that response, right? And that's the EMS fire world, right, where their worst day is our best day, and obviously we're happy to be there, and we're glad to use our skills, and we're happy to help and aid where we need to. Unfortunately, a lot of those end up in a sad or a negative standpoint, where the person is deceased or passed away or isn't there. probably the one that I was telling somebody about it just the other day. Our guys got called out yesterday on a missing person search and to clear a bunch of wood area and help a sheriff's department do some search and rescue. And I was recounting this story just the other day about one that I was on, and it was a search for a I think it's so long ago, but she was 4 or 5 years old. This little girl that had gone missing, and we got called out around it was probably 3 in the afternoon, and we deploy. We send our teams out there, and we're out there looking. And obviously she's just gone missing in the last hour. So this is a very hot search, right? It's not cold. It's a hot search. So we're hitting all these zones, and they have us going through the muck looking for this little girl, right? And we're doing you're doing the skull drag through some of these things, and you're kind of looking at each other like, I don't think she's back here, but we're gonna look, right? We're gonna get after it. Alert guys are gonna go through whatever it takes to finish the mission. And you always end up with just all sorts of scratches on your arms and your face, and you're bleeding. But by golly, you're going through it, right? And I remember the incident commander looking at this wall of thorns and saying, "She might be in there. Like, go in there." And we're looking at each other like, "There's no way this 5-year-old girl walked off the road into there." But we're going, right? And so we get down on all fours and we're skull dragging through this thing looking for this little girl. And we're searching till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and we find her, right, not in there. We ended up finding her down a couple miles east of there. She had followed her dog, right? Her dog had walked off, and so she followed her dog, and she'd walked down a trail into the woods, and we ended up finding her, right? And so that's probably one of the most memorable ones. Is just number one how miserable the search was, because it was just in the muck here, in the thorns and the tangle, and you're walking through some up to your waist in water and mud and stuff. But that one ended positively, right? We were able to find this little girl and return her to her parents. And so, like I said, I was just telling someone about that the other day. I was like, man, a lot of these don't end positively, but I do remember and I've been on dozens of these over my time, maybe even hundreds. And I actually don't remember the ones that end negatively because there's just so many of them. I for sure remember that one because it ended positively.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know you guys travel nationally and even internationally to help with different disasters. I know in a lot of these areas, firefighting, search and rescue, EMT, a lot of their kind of search or their certifications and connections don't always interface. What organizations do you partner with? I mean, how do you get tied in to be able to provide these services to sheriff's departments, government agencies, other people throughout the country who maybe have different training, different certifications than what you guys do?
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously, most of the certifications we give are national certifications, right? And that's on purpose so that obviously our student bodies from all over the country or even all over the world, we get a contingent of international students. And so we do try to train up to kind of a national standard, whether it's in the search and rescue or in the firefighting or in the EMT. So these guys can go back and use those certifications from whatever state they're from or even country they're from. And so that is helpful when it comes to we're all speaking the same language. We're all going through the same incident command courses, ICS courses, NIMS courses, right? As we work with, whoever we're working with, whether it's a government agency. So, we were down in Kirk County, right? When Kirk County had that massive flooding last summer, we deployed there doing body recovery down there. Well, we'd all been through that training. And so when you show up, you all speak the same language. So especially when you're working with a government agency, you really got to know the language and know the incident command system, and then be able to work within that system. When it comes to other NGOs or non-government organizations, that is where it gets a little more tricky. When we work with government agencies, a lot of the time we show up and they're assuming that we're the subject matter experts, and sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're just a contingent of a bigger operation going on. Sometimes we show up and we are the subject matter experts. They say, man, you guys have more time on the pond. You've done more than we have. You guys take this and run with it. And so, there was a tornado in Van, Texas, a number of years ago. We were the first on scene. They let us run the incident command system because they said, you guys actually have more time than, I've never done this. You guys take it. So we took it, right? We ran the incident command system and talked to the government and, worked all, those things that were happening. With NGOs or other non-government agencies, nonprofits, that is where it can get sticky because they've got their own systems or their own language or their own way of doing things. And we've worked with a whole slew of them. Organizations like Mercy Ships, we've done some deployments with them over the years. We work really hand in hand with Samaritan's Purse. is kind of one of the bigger ones that we deploy with, where we're kind of the boys in blue for them, where they'll give us a phone call and say, hey, can you give us 30 guys here, 10 guys there, help wrap up this work deployment here. And they've taken us international sometimes, right? Where they took our guys to Turkey for a while to do some work out there, flew us out there. I was on a team that they flew us out to California to do wildfire relief, right? And they needed hands out there, so they called us up, and we sent, with alumni and student body, they flew us out there, and we worked with them for a couple of weeks. They're probably the biggest organization or other non-government agency we work with is Samaritan's Purse. But we've done Operation Blessing, we've done Mercy Ships, Texas Baptist Men, right? And we'll work hand in hand with pretty much any other NGO that needs us or wants to use us. We're pretty flexible. And then obviously government agencies, sheriff's offices, a lot of it's word of mouth, right? And so I'll get phone calls from random sheriffs. He's like, well, I talked to this guy who talked to this guy who talked to this guy who said, you guys can do this. And I said, yeah, we can. So a lot of it's word of mouth, or this sheriff talks to this sheriff, or this governor used us 20 years ago on this disaster relief, right? Or and when we've done it, right? We were Space Shuttle Columbia, right? We were a main search operation when that happened years ago. When Hurricane Katrina hit, we were main operations on that one, right? So we've had some of these bigger, major national disasters we've been a part of. And then there's the small ones, right? The little, tornadoes that go through Gilmer, Texas, just north of here. We respond to that, do chainsaw relief or tarpon roofs or whatever, or looking for people or providing care. So big or small, it doesn't really matter to us as long as we can be of service.
Okay. And so if we have some listeners that are involved in, a local sheriff's office or something, what is the process to contact you guys and take advantage of your services? And I guess maybe for more, immediate stuff like that, how wide of an area do you cover? How quickly can you get to which areas?
Yeah. So, I mean, the main point of contact is just call the office number, right? You'll find that on our website there. And we're a small enough organization, right? I mean, it's me and about 13 to 14 other staff members, instructors, trainers. We have more contractors that come in and teach and stuff, but for the most part, it's only 15 of us. So you're going to get a hold of me or one of my officers very quickly. Especially if it is an urgent search or an urgent recovery or an urgent disaster that's happening. So it all depends on the time of year, right? So sometimes we don't have a student body, right? We run, quarterly semesters and stuff. So sometimes we don't have anybody to send. Sometimes it doesn't fit the timing or the distance. It all really depends on, how emergent is it, as in, how much of an emergency is it? Do we have the manpower? Does it make sense in the training calendar? I mean, this one that we had, yesterday that I sent our guys out on, or the other day, they contacted me Sunday and they said, hey, can you deploy a team today? And I said, well, how emergency is it? Like, well, the guys are missing for a week, right? Well, that doesn't tell me that's an emergency, right? That says, oh, okay, wait till Monday, right? Yeah, okay, we'll do Monday, right? As where if they'd said, hey, this little girl, like the little girl story I told, right? Well, she's been missing for an hour. Well, we're going to go, right? And it's 45 minutes away, and we're going to, and we all keep go bags, right? Our guys are trained that way. They're trained for that active response, right? And we have an alarm system to go off and say, hey, you and you, you're going on deployment, and grab your go bag. You got 15 minutes, and you'll be on the road. So we can be as quick as about, probably 15 minutes to half an hour, depending on the time of day, where we can turn things around and get guys on the road heading that direction.
Well, I know, you have a lot of experience as a first responder and EMT, search and rescue firefighter. For the average Joe that just wants to keep himself and his family safe, do you have any advice about how they can best prepare just for life events and avoid being one of the people that you're searching for or working on?
Yeah. I'll just tell you what I keep in my own two cars, right? Because a lot of the emergencies you run in on are actually on the highway, and I've had all sorts of moments in my life where you watch a car flip 3 times in front of you, or you pull off and there's this big pile up and things. And the beautiful thing about the training that I've received here at Alert and our alumni receive, it is not that you keep this whole cache of stuff in your car so you can be of good service. It's actually the thing that's between your 2 ears, right? And being able to have a calm presence in a crisis situation. Because really, without an ambulance, a doctor and an EMT are kind of as equally useless, right? They may have different sets of knowledge, but without the right tools, we're both kind of sitting there going, well, I think they're broken. I hope they're, so for my own 2 vehicles, I actually keep small fire extinguishers, just handheld fire extinguishers in both vehicles. whether that's for vehicle fires or other vehicle fires or things. I keep window punches in both vehicles, right? So I'm able to, either punch out somebody else's window or punch out my own window. I keep a set of medical gloves, right? If it's warm, wet, and not yours, don't touch it. And so being able to throw medical gloves on in any circumstance or situation, right? And so I keep a set of those in both vehicles. And then, just a basic medical, where you have a CPR mask, right? Something to create a barrier, and maybe some gauze, and then a tourniquet. CPR is going to save lives, and a tourniquet is going to save lives, right? Because you're just the first step, right? You're the first responder. Hopefully, you got bigger resources coming. Hopefully, you don't have to be there for 3 hours, packing gauze or whatever. You're just there as the very first guy showing up on scene. How do you make it better, right? Well, you make it better through getting rid of the active, things that are most dangerous at the time, right? Whether it's, lack of breathing or lack of consciousness or fire or whatever. If you can do that, man, you are probably more useful than 90% of the bystanders standing around that are just kind of looking, going, well, that's not a good thing. And again, really bringing that calm head to a crisis situation. And I mean, I'll just tell you a story. So I was this was several years ago, and I was on an airplane. And, they come over the loudspeaker and they go, is there a doctor on the plane? And nobody moves. And they go, hey, we have a medical emergency. Is there a doctor on the plane? And I'm sitting there waiting, and I'm like, I am not a doctor, right? And nobody moves. So I go, well, I guess I'll hit my button, right? So I hit my button, and they come back to me, oh, hey, sir. And I say, hey, I'm just an EMT. So, I have emergency medical training. It's pretty basic. What do you need? They say, well, we got this person up front of the plane who's having these convulsions, and they're sick. And we just, so, okay. So I go up there. They've got enough medical equipment on the plane to where I can take a basic line of vitals, right? And I have a conversation, I ask my questions, and the person is fine. They really are fine. Now, the flight crew is freaking out. The people on the plane are freaking out, but the person is fine. And I'm able to sit there with my, though limited medical knowledge and say, look, they're going to be fine. When are we landing? Like 15 minutes. I say, they can wait 15 minutes. Now, they should probably go to the hospital when we get off there, right? You can call an ambulance ahead of time or whatever. But this isn't a horrible emergency where we need to get on the ground right now. And so I'll stay up here. I'll sit with the person, right? I'll just be here with them, and we'll be fine. That's all they needed, right? They needed a calm head in a crisis situation as we're, 10,000 feet up in the air. Now, what's funny is that at the baggage claim afterwards, everybody's coming up to me being like, oh, you're the doctor, right? Because they don't know. They just heard there's a doctor on board, and I stood up, right? I was like, no, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. So that's where, even, and that's what I encourage, people, if they can get their EMTB or their, emergency care attendant, even if they never work as one ever a day in their life, right? Take a CPR course, take a basic first aid course. You just never know where you're going to be. And you can be that calm head in a crisis situation and help, and especially if you have, that tourniquet or that mouth barrier for CPR, you can do a lot of good with a very limited amount of equipment there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very similar to the list of things I make sure are in all of my vehicles as well. I'm coming up on, this summer will be the 20th anniversary for me being a search and rescue first responder. So
okay, and awesome, yeah.
A tourniquet and an Israeli bandage.
Yep, there you go. Those will work magic, right?
Yeah. CPR, a tourniquet, an Israeli bandage, those are the big life-saving things.
Yeah, and you can go deeper, right? I think you can get confused and overly complicated if you're not careful. And, like, oh, well, should I have an IV bag? And well, you can, I guess, if you're certified that way. But now you're pushing boundaries of Good Samaritan laws and things. And you're like, let's just keep it to the basics, right? You're the first responder, not the last responder. And so just get there, cause some good with what you've got. Make the situation better, not worse. Don't do any harm to yourself, right? Keep yourself safe and your family safe. And then hopefully do some good with whether the skills or the tools you brought to the scene.
Yeah, and things that people actually die of. Blood loss,
right?
Blocked airways. If you need some fancy medications or something, you're probably not doing a lot of good out in the field anyway. They need to get to a doctor. But if you can stop the bleeding,
a helicopter or a box. Yeah.
If you can clear an airway and stop the bleeding, that's you can solve 80-90% of life-threatening situations just with those two things. So
yeah, 100%.
That's great. Well, I know you've talked a lot about leadership, responsibility, and kind of moving up in the ranks there at Alert. What was the most difficult thing that you faced as a leader?
Man, I'll tell you that some of the most difficult transitions I had, with this one probably being the most difficult, right? When I finally became the director, that gap in leadership or that step in leadership. It's all fun and games until you're the guy, right? Until the buck stops with you. The other step was very similar, and that was when I was sergeant major over the battalion. Right? I went from being over 30 guys as first line drill instructor to over 100 guys as the sergeant major. And I was out of my depth. And that was good for me, right? It stretched me, it grew me in a tremendous amount of ways. It caused all sorts of resilience to be grown. Because I'm within the first 2 weeks, of that that sergeant major position, I was ready to quit. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't sign up for this. This is ridiculous. And so that was a big challenge. And then this job also is probably the other big challenge. This one is probably challenging more so because it's pretty administrative, which I knew going into it, not a surprise. But that's also not what I fell in love. I didn't fall in love with administration, right? I fell in love with the men. I fell in love with the discipleship and the people. And now I'm doing a lot of administrative work, right? And I'll just be honest, that is not my gifting, right? That is just not. I work with my hands, and let's get out and do stuff and get in the field. And now, obviously, I very rarely deploy anymore just because of the position that I'm in. I've got other guys to go take those deployments or drive the vans or go on hikes and stuff. And so that's actually probably working with students. They're very teachable. They've come to be taught. They've come to be mentored. They want to get better. When you're working with staff members, right, some of who used to be your peers, it's probably that friend-boss tension. That's probably the biggest struggle, is where students come in. Well, I've never been their friend. I may become their friend, but I've always been kind of their boss, right? Or I've been in charge of them. Yeah. As we're now as the director of the program, I've got subordinates that used to be equals with me or used to be my friends, and they still are. Well, now I'm their boss, right? Now I'm cutting paychecks, and now I've got to hand out some discipline, or now I've got to hold them accountable, and I got to hold the standard. And I heard it put a couple weeks ago. It's like, I don't even know if you can be a boss and a friend. You can either be a friendly boss or a bossy friend, but I don't know if you can be a boss friend, right? And it's kind of this tier of roles, right? And one of the things I'm still learning is that as you move into new roles, and so for some of my staff, I've got multiple roles, right? I'm their friend, and I'm their boss, and I'm their mentor, or I'm their I go to church with them. So those are multiple roles I fill with maybe one individual. Well, I've got to kind of put those in a little bit of a hierarchy and say, okay, in this season of life, which is the most important right now, right? And it can't be the friend role, because if I'm going to say things to you as a boss that I probably wouldn't say to you as a friend. I'm going to have to, or I'm going to have to say things or hold you accountable. And so I've kind of had to recalibrate and say, okay, let's put the right slot. Primarily, I have to be your boss first, right? I love you, and and I'm going to go to church with you. I'm going to be your friend. But remember, on Monday, I do expect you to show up to work on time or whatever. As our friend, a friend may not be putting screws to you like that. And so that's probably the biggest in this position specifically, is holding that boss friend tension well and trying to put those roles into kind of that hierarchy, right? It's kind of like your pastor at church, right? Like your pastor is your friend, and he may be your neighbor, and he's also your pastor. Well, which of those roles needs to come first in your life? Probably that pastor role. Yeah. Right? Because a pastor is going to have to be able to tell you things that your neighbor would never tell you, right? He's going to have to hold your feet to the fire on things that your neighbor's not going to confront you on your sin necessarily, but your pastor should. He has to. That's his job. And so you're making sure I've got my pastor in the right category, right? He might be my friend, he might be my neighbor, but first he has to be my pastor. And so same thing in this role, right? I am your friend, and I am your neighbor, and I am your, work in the fire department with you, or whatever. But first and foremost, when you and I interact in this context, I got to be your boss. And that's tough. That is not an easy thing to do when it comes to any organization, but for sure an organization like this, where you kind of all on the same team, and maybe like me, I kind of grew up in the organization, and so I know all my staff very well, right? I've seen them in all sorts of capacities, and now I'm in charge of all of them, and that can be a difficult tangle to figure out.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I like to just call it out. Because, you mentioned, the boss says things sometimes that a friend wouldn't say, but sometimes it can go the other way. A friend would say things that might be inappropriate for a boss to say. And so I like to, hey, you work for me, but this is not a work thing. I'm taking off my boss hat.
Mm.
I'm going to put it aside. I'm not telling you this as your superior. As a friend that cares about you, I see this in your life and I want to just ask, how are you doing? And so, don't file a complaint with HR.
That's
In this,
right.
in
That's
this
right.
moment, I'm not your boss. It doesn't affect your employment. I'm worried about you. I care about you. There's somebody that cares about you. I want to talk about this. Or, vice versa. Hey, we were fishing yesterday. We had a good time, but you were late to work today. And now as your boss, we have to talk about that. So,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
One of the things I found helpful in doing that is even just changing locations of conversations,
Yeah.
right? And so when I'm having boss conversations, well, we should probably hold those in a boss context, which is probably in my office, right, in some way, shape, or form. And then if we're gonna have a friend conversation, let's go out for coffee. Let's get out of the office, get out of the distractions. Let's get out off the campus, or whatever, right? And actually go to a coffee shop, and that can help change the whole mood of putting that conversation in the right context. Just moving locations can actually help bring either bring the blood pressure up because it needs to be up, saying, hey, it's a boss conversation, or bring it down because this is a friend conversation. Like easy, you're doing just fine. Chill out.
Yeah, that's good. There's some good advice there. What is your favorite thing and your least favorite thing about your job?
Oh man, my favorite thing about the job is really what it was from the beginning. Why I stayed, and that's watching transformation happen. Whether it's in my own staff, right, as I watch them grow and mature and take on new roles and new leadership, and or the student body, right. When I get to see student body grow and learn, and not just during their time at the academy, I get the opportunity sometimes to actually follow these guys after they leave, right? I get to go to their weddings, or I get to meet their children one day. One of our guys, just got through Green Beret School, right, a couple of years ago, and I got to go to that ceremony, right? And that's a really cool thing to be a part of, right? And you don't sit there like, haha, I'm the reason. No, it's not. I'm not sitting there saying I'm the reason he did all these things. But you say, man, I got to play a small sliver of time in this guy's life. What a privilege that. So that's probably the coolest part of the job is getting to go to these weddings or go to these, meeting these guys' kids or seeing them graduate from a college here or join the military there or whatever, or have them come back, right, for reunions or something and tell me what they're doing. That's probably the coolest part of the job is watching these guys, not just for the 9 months they're here, but 9, 10, 12 years after the fact, still doing well as men. That's really cool. And then, probably the hardest part of the job is the inverse of that is people, people, people. People are, my dad says, people are the problem, right? If it wasn't for all these people, we wouldn't need leadership. And that's true. And it's just that, people are not logical problems waiting to be solved. Though some days I wish they were, right? You kind of wish A plus B equals C. And it's just not, which in turn makes leadership, number one, really tough, right? And unforgiving. It also makes leadership unfair, right? Where you did A and B and C doesn't happen always.
Yeah.
Right. And leadership is not fair where you think you did all the right, you can do all the right things and still lose as the leader. And so I like to say, leadership is not complicated. Now, it is because people are complicated. What I mean when I say that is that the principles of leadership are not complicated, right? What you're supposed to do as a leader, right? How you're supposed to behave. Anybody on the planet can probably tell you what a good boss is and a bad boss is. Most of those are ways bosses behave, right? We all know what good bosses are, good leaders are. Well, they're normally a set of behaviors, right? They're normally, character traits of good leadership. We all know it's not complicated, right? You can ask any Tom, Dick, and Harry, like, what makes a good leader, right? We're all going to probably say about the same things.
Yeah.
Inherently, intuitively, we know that. So it's not complicated. Leadership's not complicated, but by golly, it is difficult. It is really, really hard because people are complicated. And one day you hit it out of the park, and the very next day you strike out three in a row, three up, three down. You're going, goodness, this is just kick you in the teeth. So that's probably the hardest part of the job.
I can relate to all of that very closely. I think you and I would get along very well. When have you been most afraid as a leader, and where did that fear come from?
Man, probably the most afraid I've been. Well, there's probably a couple of moments where I have been genuinely fearful. all of them have to probably do with the fear of man,
Mm.
right? Where you have maybe a parent who's really mad at you, or a student who's really mad at you. And I've got some stories from students when I was working in the trenches that you're like, is this guy going to hit me?
Yeah.
Like he might hit me, he might deck me. And I remember just being genuinely afraid, right? Where you get a really unhappy parent, right? Who are the customers in a lot of ways? They're paying the bills. And so you get a really unhappy parent and your heart can just sink, right? And that can come out of nowhere sometimes where you're like, I don't even know how this happened, or something has gotten out of control, or you didn't meet an expectation, or whatever. And so those are all probably a part of that's what I'm going to call an idolatry problem, where I'm looking for value in the wrong places. And I'm looking for value from man, right? I want to be liked. I want to be praised. I want to, get patted on the back and tell me I'm doing a good job. And when that's threatened by either angry students or angry parents or angry staff members, all of that has to do with the fear of man, which inherently is an idolatry problem. Right? It's worshiping the creature instead of the creator, looking for my value from God instead of what's happening in that moment. And so I'm looking for value from people. And that's been threatened. And so now I am afraid. I'm afraid of, whether it's, I'm afraid of getting sued, or I'm afraid of, just people generally not liking me, right? Or not liking my program. And so those are probably and then those are, that's not a moment necessarily, but as I think about the moments where my heart drops or my heart skips a beat, or I can feel it in my stomach, or I'm not sleeping at night, right? But what is all that? Well, that's a fear, man. Right? It's afraid of what people think about me.
Have you learned anything in your time in leadership that helps you overcome that or avoid those situations?
Yeah, there's a sticky note on my desk that just has one question on it. And it says, what did you expect? And so when I end up in moments like that, or just difficult moments in general, I gotta kind of sit back and say, Jesse, you decided to work with people. You decided to work with 18-year-old young men. What did you think? What did you expect, right? You really expected it was going to be great and happy and go lucky and smooth sailing. And then you work in a very high risk environment, right? So of course, sometimes the guys do something that's dumb, right? Or the guys make a mistake and somebody gets hurt or whatever, right? Got to go to the clinic and get patched up, or this person's mad at this person and this happened and this person got their feelings hurt or whatever. A lot of why I can get frustrated is I have bad expectations, right? I expect things to go my way. I want them to go the way I want them to go. I'm the boss, right? Dang it, or things need to go the way I want them to go. And so that little sticky note helps kind of keep me because like, what did you expect, right? Where are your expectations completely out of alignment with reality? And say, wait, what am I doing? I'm working with people, so I should expect tension. I'm working with people. I should expect conflict. I'm working with young men. I should expect pushback. I'm working with young men in a high risk, high dangerous, environment. Why did I expect anything different? So that's probably the one that I come back to. And I run my staff, right? When they all get kind of angsty or antsy, you're like, I can't believe this parent, yada, yada, yada. Whoa, time out. What'd you expect? Right? This is people work. This is parent work. This is student work. This is we're we have to get up at midnight and go on a search. Yeah, what'd you expect? This alert, like welcome to the party, pal. Like you must be new here. Like this is what we do. So yeah, that's been really helpful for me over the years.
Man, yeah, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I was in a different industry, different field, but there's a lot of parallels here. So, what is a lesson that you wish you would have learned earlier?
Man, so leadership is, as I said before, it's not complicated, but it is hard. I think when I was a very young leader, I really did believe that as long as you did the right things or the right principles or the right ideas, that things would generally go a certain way. And I ended up giving the leaders who were over me a lot of grief because I saw a deficit in some of their behaviors or some of their attitudes. And I was like, well, if you just would do this, then this would happen. Well, now I'm in that position. And I go, man, a little bit of humility, Jesse, would have gone a long way. And legitimately, I've actually called some of those leaders back over the years and said, I am so sorry because I just didn't know. I just had no idea that this is as difficult as it is. That this is as hard as it is. That you can do everything right and still lose. Leadership is a little bit of a game that has to be played. And if you want to get to the place where you can change the rules of the game, you got to play by the rules for a very long time, right? Or get that position of leadership. And I didn't always play by the rules, right? When I was a young leader, right? I was kind of, edging and dodging and how do I do this? And so I ended up, I'll say griping to my upper tier leadership a lot where I was just hard on them. I was just hard, right? Like you should do this and you should do this and you should read this book and you should know these principles and blah, 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 blah. Forgetting that these guys were, 50, 60 years old, some of them, right? Hello. They've got wisdom that I don't have, right? I may have knowledge, right? Because I've read all these books, but I don't have wisdom. These guys have wisdom. And I just didn't know. And it's hard to know, right? Experience without experience, it's hard to really understand until you're sitting in the chair. Well, now I'm sitting in the chair and you're going, and guys will come to me, right? They'll say, hey, sir, well, if we just did this and this and this, and I'll look at them and I'll say, man, if only it were that simple. Don't you think I would have done that?
Yeah.
Like if it was just that, well, that was what my leader should have told me, right? They said,
Yeah.
Jesse, don't you think we would have done that if it was that simple? They didn't. They were very kind. They were very humble. They were very gracious. They listened to me. But that's a mistake I made, was really thinking that as long as you did everything right, you could still win. That is not always the case because it's people work and it's complicated. And one day you hit it out of the park and the very next day it's 3 strikes and you're out. That's the price of being in charge.
Man, I love it. There is some real wisdom in that experience you shared there. That's one of my favorite lines is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
Yeah, as a senior leader, probably you've experienced this as well. I know in business, there are certain positions that everybody thought they could do. That's the sweet job. They're in charge. They're the boss. They get to do whatever they want. I want that job. And then you promote somebody to that position, and it takes about a day and a half, and they figure out,
Like, what is this? Well, and here's the thing, right? Because you've never sat in that job, you don't actually know what they're having to deal with, right?
exactly.
You have this fantastical idea, or this is part of that lesson that I learned. It's this fantasy that it's something that it actually isn't, right? Some of
Yeah.
it's true, right? And you do this, and you are in charge, yeah. Some of it's not true at all, right? Sometimes the government comes and tells you you can't do that, right? That's against the law. Or you're like, oh, well, I didn't know that was against the law. I didn't know you can't do that, right? So here you are yelling at your boss, like, well, if you guys would just do this, they're like, that's not even illegal. We're not allowed to do that, right? And so you do kind of have this fantasy of what you think this position or that position is going to be when you get there. And some of it is true, most of it is not. Because number one, you don't have never felt the emotional pressure of being in that position, right? And that's not nothing, right? That's a huge part of that weight, right? Heavy is the head that wears the crown. You've never had that emotional weight of responsibility, and then two, you never actually had to deal with making those decisions for that organization or for that team or for that situation. And so now you're sitting there going, "Oh, I actually have to make that phone call, right, to that parent, or I have to make that phone call to that lawyer, or I got to talk to this person about this, or talk to that person about that." Well, that's a whole different ball game. It's really easy to be like, well, if I was in charge, I would. Well, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you wouldn't do that at all because you don't have all the information that leader had. That's why that leader made that call, is that they're sitting in a room with way more information that you have, and so you're down here a little peon saying, well, this is what I would do. Well, it might not be what you do. And when you get there, you find, like you said, take a day and a half, and you're going, oh my goodness, this is a whole different game.
Yeah. Yeah, and the secondary unintended consequences of those decisions. A lot of the times
Oh yeah,
you can't see that until you're sitting in the seat, and it seems pretty black and white, cut and dry until you're the one making the decision, and it can get messy.
you see that fallout effect.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's
You go,
not
well,
all
they do
black
that
and white.
there, well, then I got to do that for this person, and so I can't do that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
As good as that would be, as helpful as that would be, as much as you want me to do that, here's what you don't understand: is that then I have to do it for this person and that person, and that's not healthy. It's not good for the organization. Or I don't do it for those other people, and I just do it for you. Well, now I'm playing favorites, right? Now I'm doing favoritism, and now that's a whole different kettle of fish. So
Yeah. Yeah, it gets real messy real fast, and like you said, you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes it
yeah,
looks clear from one perspective, but when you're the guy sitting in the hot seat, things change real fast.
real quick.
Well, a related question. This is one of my favorites. Is there an opinion you once held strongly that you've changed because of your experiences?
Yeah, a lot of it's kind of wrapped up in the previous conversation, but it's probably the that fantasy idea, right? Where if I was in that position, I would do this. Almost none of us actually behave the way we think we're going to behave, right? It's really easy to make up a world that doesn't exist and to think, oh, well, when I'm the pastor or when I'm the elder or when I'm the whatever, and you can do that because you're not actually there. It costs you nothing to make up that narrative in your head. And it's very easy to cast judgment on other people, especially people that are your boss. And so you cast judgment, and I wouldn't do that. You get there and you realize, oh wait, I'm this. You could say it this way: the non-leader you is the leader you. Nothing changes but the title, right? There's no magical transformation that you go to bed one night not a leader, and then you get a title, and you wake up the next morning and say, oh wow, look, I'm disciplined and I have self-control and I show up to work on time and I know how to be honest. No, you might have been a jerk as a follower. Well, guess what you're going to be as a boss? You're going to be a jerk because that's who you are. And so there is no magical transformation, but we do that. We create that fantasy in our heads about when I'm in charge, I'm going to behave a certain way, I'm going to do things differently. You may not. And so that's why I tell people, man, that the first person, this is kind of a John Maxwell thing, but the first person you lead is you. And so learning how to lead yourself really well when you're a follower will correlate to being able to be a good leader, or at least a decent leader, when you're in charge, right? And you may not do everything right, and you may, you still got problems and things, but for sure it's going to be an easier transition if you're that really good follower, and you're leading yourself really well, really intentionally. Well, then by extension, you're probably going to be an intentional leader. But if you're kind of a bum down here, well, you're probably going to be a bum as a leader. Now you just have a title, and now you're just doing more damage, right? Before, your lack of self-control only affected you. Well, now your lack of self-control, right? Your angry outbursts, now they affect everybody. The whole culture of the organization, the whole mood of the room. And so that's a lesson I've had to learn the hard way. I'll be like, I'm not angry, I'm passionate, right? And kind of excuse my way out of maybe outbursts. It's like, well, that was okay when I was down at the bottom of the food chain. Well, now I'm at the top of the food chain and I have an outburst. Well, now everybody knows about it. Everybody hears about it. It trickles down through the whole culture, and it's, hey, Jesse's angry. He's in a mood today. Don't go talk to him. Well, that's not good. And then now you've done damage to the organization and the culture. So just really learning how to lead yourself well before the risk and the cost is high. Because once you're there, it's in some ways it's almost too late. Or you can still make it up, but you got a lot of cleanup on aisle 6 if you carry those behaviors and those habits that are not helpful into the position of the title.
That's good. That ties into a topic or something that I would present to a lot of guys working for me for a long time was they'd I always get the menial tasks. I want to do one of the important jobs. I want that job. I want to do that thing. And the menial thing that doesn't really matter, you do a poor job at it. So why would I give you a job that actually matters? The job that doesn't matter, show me you can do that well, and I'll give you a job that does actually matter. It's not the other way around. If you slack off and do a crummy job at the job that doesn't matter, you don't just magically do a great job at the job that really does matter and is important.
Yeah. We'll tell guys, if I can't trust you to make your bed, why would I trust you with men? Right? Why would I trust you with and which is why we do the training the way we do it, and we put them through that boot camp phase, that basic training we give them, is because we say, man, before I put you on the tower at 90 feet in the air rescuing somebody's life, if I can't trust you to make your bed, I ain't putting you out there. Yep. Or 60 feet under the water looking for a body or a car or a handgun for the sheriff's office. Well, I'm not doing that because you're going to kill yourself down there and somebody else, right? And so if you can't make your bed and tie your shoes and polish your boots and iron your uniform and show up on time, when life is easy, right? It's real simple over here. You got no decisions to make. We're making them all for you. And you can't do that well. We're not putting you in the air. We're not giving you your pilot's license or whatever. So yeah, that's direct correlation. I watch this actually play out in real time. And this is where the leadership principles, as John Maxwell talks about, they are principles, right? And they are foolproof and they do work. I went to Fire Academy in Dallas, actually. So by the time I went to Fire Academy, I kind of aged out of this program here. I was an officer here. I was teaching. I didn't have the time to go through Alerts Fire Academy. So I ended up doing this other course in Dallas. I was 25, 26, but I was actually one of the younger cadets in this Fire Academy. And 3 or 4 days into the academy, you pick your company officers and you collectively pick them, right? And it was me and another alert guy, actually. We'd gone to this Fire Academy together in Dallas. And we were 2 of the youngest cadets there in the Fire Academy. But we took these principles we learned at Alert, right? Showing up on time, working hard, getting after it, quiet professionals, make your bed, polish your boots, work really hard. And we applied those for those, couple of days that we were there. Well, when they picked the company officers, they picked him and myself, right, as a captain and a lieutenant. And these were guys that were in their late 20s and early 30s and even 40s. And they said, we want to follow you guys. And we were like, you want to follow us? Like, we're 25. Why do you want to follow us? Well, it's because we were faithful in those small things, right? This isn't, toot our own horn, but I was shocked, and I was like, it worked, right? It actually worked, right? I was faithful in making my bed and showing up on time and working hard and getting after it. That quiet professionalism. I let my work speak for itself, not my words. I kept my mouth shut, my head down, and show up, shut up, get up, and do up. And they say, we'll follow you. We'll follow you into a burning building, right? Even though you've got little experience and you're young, we'll follow you because we can see you're faithful with making your bed. So you're probably going to take care of us when we get on the fire.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. I see that played out every day in different areas, and you're articulating those principles very well. So, is there a major mistake that you've made that you wish you could have avoided?
When I was early on, this would have been when I was in charge of basic training. So that first phase, I was the commanding officer of that phase, which is the boot camp phase. I was probably 27, 28. It was another big step in my leadership, right? Maybe not the biggest step, is a big jump. And very early on, I kind of held moms and dads or parents a little bit at a distance, where I kind of felt threatened by them for whatever reason. And very early on, I had some pretty major things transpire in that first year or two, and it wasn't working. Right. It was some antagonistic parents and some really hard conversations. And it was kind of getting one of my leadership mentors who'd mentored me for years and years and years. And I was like, what? What is happening right now? And he's like, Jesse, you're not a parent, right? Like, of course I don't trust you. Right. You're 27. These people are 47. They're 57, right? You have to work at earning their trust. And one of the things you have to do is level expectations. Right? What you're bucking up against is these parents have all these expectations and you're not meeting them, and you don't even know what they are, right? Because you're not a parent, right? So you don't know what it would be like to send your son to Alert. You don't know what it would be like to entrust your 18-year-old baby to this program, right? That's difficult and hard and dangerous. And so I sat with, after that mentoring conversation, I sat down and I wrote this long list of here's what you can expect of me as your son's commanding officer. And I wrote all these email templates, and I ended up sending them out every week. And they're still used to this day, right? 10, 11 years later, we still use those templates that I wrote up because I was getting beat up so badly. And I was like, this is horrible. This is miserable. The guy who'd had the job before me was a dad. He was a parent. He could talk the language. He could relate to, I even called my dad, right? Who's been one of my leadership mentors over. And I was like, Dad, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, I can work with young men, but I can't work with mom and dad.
Yeah.
And part of that was that level expectations, right? Tell them exactly what to expect out of you and your organization so that they can come to the table going, this is what I can expect. And they don't have unrealistic expectations of you. And so that was a really hard lesson there for about a year and a half, where I was just beat up 16 different ways from Sunday. And the more I got beat up, the more I wanted to hold them at a distance, right? Yeah. And these mentors in my life are like, they're not the enemy, right? You got to actually bring them into the fold. You need to over communicate and over have conversations, pick up the phone. And you don't have to do things exactly how they want you to do them. You can come up with creative solutions, but you've got to be talking to these parents. You've got to be communicating with your customer base this way. And you're thinking that the students are your customers. Well, they are on campus, but mom and dad are paying the bills. And so you've got to be able to reach them too. So that was a really, where I was very much out of my depth, just because I wasn't a parent. I was very young. I thought I had all the answers right. And so there's some of that pride and ego, and I held people at a distance where I needed to bring them in and embrace them and then help level the expectations with proactive communication.
Okay. Man, it sounds like you're kind of a pro at learning from your mistakes and putting in processes to correct it moving forward. I think that's a mark of a great leader, is when you can honestly evaluate yourself and make changes instead of blaming something else. So kudos to you.
Well, it's certainly been a leadership road of hard knocks, that's for sure. and I don't get it every time, right? Sometimes I got to go through it 2 or 3 times, You go, okay, I got to stop banging my head against that. We need to change tactics.
You got to have that question of what is the common denominator?
Yeah,
I've been in this
it's
same
probably
situation
me.
a bunch of times.
Yeah,
The only thing that's common is me.
is
Ah,
me. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm the issue here. Yeah.
I know you've kind of devoted your entire adult life to this career track, helping these young men, this alert program. If you could go back to 2008, would you choose to do it all over again?
Oh yeah, I actually tell parents that, right? I tell prospective students that. I say alert was one of the best things I ever did, both as a young man and now obviously continue to do as a middle-aged man. I don't know what we are, right? Whatever. But I absolutely would do it again, right? I would not change from the experiences I got, the friendships I got, the perspective I got. I mean, it radically transformed my life, right? It changed my life, right? I didn't quite know what I was going to do, join the military and go into fire EMS or whatever. And obviously, Alert helped answer that question. And yeah, and it also obviously gave me direction. It unlocked a passion I didn't even know I had, right? And that was for helping other young men. Because by God's grace, I got helped as a young man, right? And mentors gave me a shot and they gave me permission to stretch my wings as a young leader and being able to turn around and do that for other young guys and watch them grow, right? Coolest things about being around an organization as long as I have is you get to watch guys go from being day one students all the way through the same trajectory that I took, right? And they become, midterm leaders and drill instructors and senior drill sergeants or sergeant majors. And that takes a 4 or 5 year long process. But you got to be around long enough to see that and to watch guys that come in and you're like, this guy's kind of a bozo, right? Or whatever. Or you say, you'd never peg this guy. And then you watch him grow, right? And then he becomes a sergeant major. He becomes an upper tier leader. He becomes an officer, right? And he works and he instructs here, right? And being a part of that journey, man, you can't put a price tag on that. And I used to know, I was like, that was the coolest part of my job, right? As I would look around, it's like, I knew every single one of you guys at 18 years old. I knew because I've been around long enough, I knew every single one of you guys as a day one student. And now you're all upper tier leaders. That's an incredible journey to be a part of.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great. I think you kind of alluded to it there, but what has been your biggest win as a leader? What are you most proud of?
Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm most proud of is watching these guys grow within the organization and then grow outside the organization. There's a couple of real hard cases over the years where guys have come through and they've come from broken homes. Or they've come from rough backgrounds. And, everybody on the outside was like, there's no way this guy's going to make it, right? Or there's no way this guy, you need to give up on this guy. By God's grace, we were able to continue with those guys. Not all of them, right? Sometimes guys wash out or guys quit or, sometimes they don't make it. But there's probably 4 or 5 that I could, call to memory right now that we kind of, high expectations, but we believe you can meet them. Back to that idea. And they rose to the occasion. And these guys have moved on to be good husbands and good fathers, and I got to be a part of that, that transforming process while they were here in training. I mean, that's again, you can't put a price tag on that. And so it's always good when good guys come and they do really well. That's kind of expected, though, right? They come here and they're like, oh yeah, I love this. This is my bread and butter. Like I can eat this up all day. And those guys, go on to be, Navy SEALs and Delta operators and Green Berets, right? All of which our alumni are out there doing. But you kind of like, you'll meet them on day one and they'll say, hey, what do you want to do with your life? Like, well, after I'm done here, I'm going to join the Navy SEALs. Those guys, you're like, yeah, you probably are, right? And they do, right? Because they're already kind of geared that way. And those are awesome, right? And I'm glad to be a part of those. It's actually the more of the Rocky Balboa stories, right? The zero to heroes that I'm the most proud of, right? When you watch these guys, right? Again, by God's grace, go from when you're like, I don't think you can tie your shoes, dude. How in the world are we going to get you through this? And it does. It works, right? They're committed. They want to be helped. They want to grow. And if something clicks in their brain, they lock in. And some of those guys end up making a turn and going on to, work in special forces or become lawyers or doctors or whatever, right? Those are probably the coolest part of the job is you sit back and you go, him? Really? That happened? It's awesome. It really is awesome to watch that happen.
Man, that's great. I love that. What has been your best resource to grow as a leader?
Man, I was actually on your website earlier looking at all your book recommendations.
Oh yeah.
At the bottom of your website, I think I've read every single one of them. And I was like, oh man, like this list is my list. Like I love every single one of these, right? So obviously, the classic mantra: readers or leaders or readers. And so I try to be decently well read as a leader. I try to listen to a plethora of podcasts, right? From Andy Stanley has always been kind of a big one. To John Maxwell was the foundation of my leadership journey, right? One of my mentors when I was 13, 14, 15 gave me a John Maxwell book, and that was kind of the very beginning of my leadership pipeline, where I read some principles in there that I still carry to this day, right? And I still use. So that's kind of the foundation, right? And obviously, as I've bridged off from there to read the Simon Sinek's and the Jocko Willink and all those. One of the best leadership books I ever read was actually by Albert Mohler, who's the president of Southern Seminary. And his book, Conviction to Lead, is probably one of the best leadership books that I ever read. It is so concise and so on the nose. I actually go back and I'll reread it, right, every other year just to remind myself of the things that I've learned in there. And so obviously that's kind of the classic, listen to podcasts and read. Probably the biggest thing that has made a leadership difference in my life, though, is actual flesh and blood mentorship. Is sitting down with a cup of coffee, and here's what I've realized is that as the mentee, I have to do the pursuing, and as young leaders, we have to be okay with that, right? It's knocking on the door, sending the email, sending the text, buying the coffee, getting up at 4 a.m. and driving to wherever to sit down with this guy and take notes. And your job again is to show up and shut up, and bring a notebook and ask questions and take notes. I've got things on my desk to this day that, a mentor just drew in front of me. And he said, here's how you need to be spending your time, right? It needs to be a third here, a third here, a third here. And I keep that in my planner. So when I start my day, I look at that graph. And so those are probably the biggest impact in my life is the actual flesh and blood, picking up the phone. I still call the founder now and again, right? Ron Furman, I'll call him, pick him up, right? Because there's only been 4 directors in Alert's history, right? I'm one of the 4. Well, that means there's only 4 guys in the whole world who know exactly what I'm dealing with. Well, I should probably be calling those guys, right? And talk. So I'll do that, right? I'll talk to those guys. And so here's what I'm dealing. And they just say, oh, I get that. Oh, I understand that. Yep, I hear. And here's some wisdom on that. I talked to him 2 weeks ago. And that was a phenomenal conversation to help, right my rudder a little bit and go, oh, that's right. Okay. This is what I should be expecting. This is what I should be course correcting. So probably the biggest leadership influence. That's what I would encourage people to. Man, you got to find people who are doing what you want to do or have been where you are, and show up and listen, and take them out to coffee and sit down and just soak up what you don't have, which is wisdom, right? The owl of wisdom flies at night, right? It's at the end of life that we finally get wisdom, especially as a young leader. I have knowledge and information. I don't have wisdom. And so I have 2 options to get wisdom. One is to live a really long life, right, which I'm working on. But the other is to hang out with wise people. And so really making that a habit and a practice has been fundamental to my leadership growth.
Good stuff there. And sorry, this is way off script, but it just kind of popped into my mind with our discussion here. I'm kind of turning that corner in my career where now I'm the advisor in a few areas, and the people that have replaced me are now the ones calling me asking for advice. And we talked earlier, when you're the subordinate, it's really easy to look at the person in that position and judge it, and you have no idea what's going on. As that advisor now, I'm finding, the things we talked about, that emotional pressure, the secondary consequences, all of that's relieved a lot. And so there's a lot of times where a situation that would have been very heavy and very stressful for me as the leader, when I'm now the mentor advising someone, I understand what they're going through and I can relate it, but I'm removed enough from it that the clear path is a lot more clear. I know so this is hard, but this is what you have to do.
And that's literally what Ron told me 2 weeks ago. He said, I wish I could have seen this while I was there.
Yeah.
But here's the answer to your question. Because I was struggling. I was like, sir, I came to mentor young men. I'm not doing any of that anymore, right? I'm pushing papers. I'm writing checks or whatever. And he says, you're right. What you need to see is that you are now the mentor of the mentors, right? Yeah. He says if you can mentor The officers, right, and your mentoring is happening through your subordinates. And that's what he says. He says, I wish I could have seen that while I was there. He said, I didn't.
Yeah.
I struggled in the same way you're struggling. And so to your point, right, he's removed from it. And he says, well, let me give you some wisdom because this is true, because I'm not in the fray like you are, right? You're
Yeah.
just frustrated with the paperwork and the administration load, and I was too. But you are the mentors. You are doing mentoring. It's just through other people. It's not you actually individually doing the mentoring.
Good stuff. Well, I know we've talked about it a little bit already. You don't know what you don't know. And man, your experience, even at a relatively young age, I think you carry a lot of wisdom and have a lot to contribute. Is there something that you wanted to discuss, wanted to talk about that we haven't asked the right questions yet?
Man, I don't think so. The only thing I can think of is that if people are interested to learn more about the Alert Academy, right? InternationalAlertAcademy.com is the website, and you can look us up and watch our stuff. And if you got questions, pick up the phone and call us, right? You can do campus tours, 5 days a week, and we got a preview day coming up at the end of May for the new unit coming out of basic training. And so if you want to see the academy on full display, all the bells and whistles and stuff. We're happy to have student body out for that. And yeah, if you want to learn more, or a young man, or you want to help young guys, pick up the phone, give us a call, check us out.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure we put all of those links and all those numbers in the show notes. We'll make it real easy for everybody. They can just scroll down in the details on their podcast app and click the link there to connect right to you. Kind of wrapping up here, we have a few questions that we ask of every guest. I know you've made it pretty clear here. You are a Christian, a person of faith. What does that mean to you, and how has that affected your leadership and your journey?
Yeah, probably in a plethora of ways. Number one, this is, you can read. I think it's John Piper who's got a little booklet, right? It's talking about the inner circle and the outer circle of leadership. And the outer circle is the stuff that that's kind of the we'll call secular leadership. Any leadership book's going to talk about it, right? And it's integrity and being a good communicator and a good judge of character and all those things. Well, the inner circle is kind of the spiritual side of things. That's kind of the lifeblood of the spiritual leader. And in there, it's the Word of God and it's the people of God and the Spirit of God. And just reminding myself that, my ability to transform people only comes through the power of God, right? It is the gospel of Jesus Christ that transforms people. It's not me. I think it's Alistair Begg who talks about walking through a graveyard now and again, just to remind himself that in the same way he can't bring people back from the dead with his words, he can actually transform people with his words. It's got to be the Spirit of God. And so in a lot of ways, it's a humbling thing to be a Christian leader because you so desperately want people to change. And at the same time, you're not actually the answer to their problems. You're not the answer to their change. The Spirit's going to have to do his work in his timing. And so God is that power source, right, to what I'm supposed to be doing. He's the direction of what I'm supposed to be doing. If these positions have done anything to me, they've driven me to my knees. That's probably the best place for me to be as a leader. It's not where I like to be. I like to be in charge, and I like to stand on my own 2 feet and have all the answers and know what I'm going to do, and be proactive and make actions and blah 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 blah. But the safest place for me to probably be is on my knees, crying out for wisdom, crying out for help, crying out for transformation in my people and in my organization and in my own life as a leader. And then the other thing I think about when this idea of faith and leader is looking at the ultimate leader, and that's Jesus Christ, right? And so it's not just this God in the wilderness who's in the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, like with the Israelites. It's man, it's God become flesh, right? And that's in the life and work of Jesus Christ. And so as we think about leadership principles for all intents and purposes, there's no better place than to look to the Son of Man. And what does he do? Right? He comes and he serves and he loves his sheep and he calls to them and he takes their burdens. And no greater love has man than this, and he laid down his life for his friend. Well, what's leadership? In a lot of ways, it's laying down your life for your subordinates, for your people. Right? I've heard it put that servant leadership is an oxymoron. Right? Because it's the same thing, right? There is no servant leadership. There's just leadership, because leadership is service. Well, where do we get that from? I love there's a book out there. It's called Humilitas.
Okay.
Which is the Latin word for humility. And in there, he makes this argument that if you look at history, the arc of history, the idea of servant leadership really doesn't come on the scene historically, right? You can believe whatever you want about Jesus, whether he's the son of God or not, or just a crazy person or a prophet, doesn't matter. Whatever you believe about Jesus, when he shows up in his writings and his teaching and his apostles, there's a dramatic transformation in what a leader is, right? And so today, you pick any book off the shelf and it says, oh, leadership is servanthood, and leadership is humility, and leadership is all these things that we take for granted. Well, before Jesus, none of that was true.
No.
Right? Before Jesus, it was doom and gloom, and I'm in charge and you're not, and I'm Roman Empire and I'm going to kill you, whatever, right? You're going to praise and glorify me. No. Yeah, exactly. Might is right. And then this little carpenter from Galilee shows up, and he says radical things like, if you want to be first in the kingdom of heaven, you got to be last. Right? What? I mean, that's a radical transformation of life and by extension leadership. And so that's really as we think about the focal point of faith and leadership, is the man God, Jesus Christ, and what he says about leadership and says about authority and says about servant leadership, and how that just absolutely transforms, it turns the leadership pyramid on its head, right? It inverts it to where now the leader is at the bottom, right? He's lifting up. He's not at the top, standing on top of everybody else.
Man, good stuff. Good stuff. Is there somebody you'd like to see on the show? Somebody that has a really unique industry, career story that you'd like to learn more about?
Man, I was thinking about this question. Obviously, the names that come to mind are, some heavy hitter names, right? Like an Andy Stanley and those big leadership gurus. One organization that I've become fairly familiar with is the Emotionally Healthy Leadership book series and podcasts. And I've really appreciated both of, Peter Scazzaro and then the guy he just gave, I think, the presidentship over to the organization. I love their content. And so, man, if you were to get somebody like that on here, they talk about leadership just from a completely different world or idea, right? And it's all about slowing down and being present and emotional intelligence and connecting to your family of origin, and those things have really been helpful for my inner working as a leader. And so those are, and they're not quite as, they're not quite the Andy Stanley level of, or John Maxwell level of leader. And so somebody like that, I think, would be really great to hear from. I listened to their podcast. I'm not sure I've ever heard an interview with them somewhere else. And so if you were to get one of those guys on here, that could be really cool.
Oh, man. Yeah, that would be good. I might reach out, see if I can get a response there. I know I read the original book there, the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I haven't dove into any of their other content, but man, chatting with you, it seems like we kind of read the same books and follow the same people. There's a lot of overlap and a lot of connections here. So,
which is great.
Yeah, awesome. Well, our last question I ask of most of our guests, this might be a little bit outside of your wheelhouse. A lot of the guys we talk to are more blue collar, but if you have a job to do that requires a cordless tool, which brand do you prefer?
Man, I am a DeWalt guy through and through, but only because that's what was bought for me. I got my first, power tools as a gift.
Yeah.
And it's from my father-in-law, actually. He was like, you need some power tools, right? Because I'm not a blue-collar guy, not as much. I wasn't gifted with necessarily hands, like I was saying in the beginning, my dad, right? He was gone, right? He's a Mariner, right? He wasn't a blue-collar guy. He wasn't working with his hands. So I didn't work with my hands. So I had no tools when I got married. My father-in-law was appalled, right? And he's like, you need a saw, and you need a drill, and you need all this stuff. And he was a DeWalt guy, so he bought me DeWalt. So I've got DeWalt. And unfortunately, once you get a brand, because it's all battery related, you're kind of stuck. You're like, why would I get anything else? And I've been happy with it. I really have. I've been happy with DeWalt. I really can't complain. It's done me well for the really little bit of home DIY projects that I do, that I risk doing. Half the time, I end up having to call somebody else anyways because I make it worse. My old pastor made a joke where he says, in my tool bag, I have a hammer and a credit card, right? So and that's a little bit me, right? I got a hammer and a credit card. But if I had to choose one, because I'm stuck with the batteries on it, and that would be DeWalt.
Man, I like it. I appreciate that. Yeah, I agree. I think most people, there are kind of some different tiers. If you start with one of the real cheap home brands, maybe you upgrade. But once you settle in on some brand, that's where you're at. Because, changing over all the batteries and all the tools. And once you get started down the road, that's where you're at. So awesome. Well,
Yeah,
we'll chalk one more up for DeWalt. I'm a DeWalt guy myself, so I think Milwaukee might be just a little bit ahead, but we're running right neck and neck with them.
and it is crazy because guys have once they're in, they're in. And they will. I mean, it's one of my instructors who does our construction program. He teaches our, he's the Milwaukee guy, right?
Yep.
And he's just like, he's DeWalt's or blah blah blah, my Milwaukee. And there's and I like, okay, I don't know enough, right? Don't get mad at me.
Oh yeah, it's funny how strong those feelings get sometimes. It's like, oh, this one's so
Oh
much
yeah.
better. Have you ever tried the other one? Have you
Like,
ever
is
even
it? Are
held
you
it?
sure? I think they're pretty compatible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One might edge the other out here or there in a specific model, but
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
yeah, those top tier brands, they're all pretty good. So awesome. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for giving us your time. I know you're a busy guy. You have a lot going on. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to meet with us and share your experience, share your wisdom. It really has been a pleasure to me, and I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of it as well.
I appreciate it, Eric. Thanks for the time. It's been great.
Yeah. And thank you guys for joining us here on From the Ground Up Show. Again, remember to like, follow, subscribe, share on your favorite podcast platform, social media, wherever you find us. Make sure you click that auto download button and check out our merch store. There really are some cool things there. Grab a new water bottle, a sweatshirt, a hat, something like that. And until next time, keep growing.